Hi, students. This is just a little video about some of the most common errors I'm seeing in your papers with quotation integration. Quotation integration is a really kind of advanced skill in academic writing, and it takes a lot of practice to get good at it and a lot of feedback from your instructors. But once you do get good at it, it's going to make a huge difference in your essays for college. So it's really worth investing the time to learn how to integrate quotations well. So some of these errors are really basic and really easy to fix, and others may take more practice, but I just wanted to go over a few of them. So the big kahuna of errors in integrating quotations, I've mentioned before in this class, and you've seen other videos about it, is the dropped quotation, which is also sometimes called a floating quotation or a bald quotation. A dropped or floating or bald quotation is just a quotation that has no lead in. It's just stuck into the essay as its own sentence. That's the biggest mistake you can make in integrating quotations, because it's really important before a quotation, to set it up and then use some kind of signal phrase so we know who's speaking. Otherwise, you're kind of switching from your voice to some writer's voice, and it's very disorienting for the reader if you do that with no warning or no kind of bridge, which is what the signal phrase kind of does. It creates a bridge between your voice and the voice you're quoting from. So here's an example of a bald quotation. Dumas writes about her disastrous house sitting job and how she didn't tell her parents about it. In this example, I just stick in the quote. My father was in Iran trying to sell our house, and I knew my mother would be of no help. So this you want to avoid because there's no bridge and it's very confusing for your reader. But the nice thing is most of the time, drop quotations are really easy to fix by just adding a signal phrase. So I put this signal phrase in bold, but you don't have to put your signal phrases in bold. I just did that here to make it really clear. Dumas writes about her, I don't know if she says Dumas or Dumas. I bet it's Dumas because it's French. And usually in French, you don't pronounce the S at the end because her husband's French. So Dumas writes about her disastrous house sitting job and how she didn't tell her parents about it. She explains, my father was in Iran trying to sell our house, and I knew my mother would be of no help. So that signal phrase makes such a difference. It just gives your reader a little bit of a bridge, saying, I'm moving now from my voice to what Dumas says. So that's how you fix a bald quote, and that's how you avoid the biggest mistake you can make in quotation integration, which is a dropped or floating or bald quote. Another thing I've seen people do, by the way, if you want to read more about bald or dropped quotations, there's another explanation of them on the Common Compositions Errors handout. That's the handout with all my grading codes. Dropped quotations are E18 on that handout. Another error I'm seeing a little bit of is people making a comma splice with a quotation, which is E19 in your Common Composition Errors handout. Now, you might remember from our videos about joining clauses correctly that comma splices are when you join two complete thoughts with just a comma in between them. So if you join two independent clauses with just a comma, that's a comma splice. And sometimes and it's a mistake and you want to avoid it. And sometimes people do this with quotes. So here, for example, we have a complete thought. Dumas is obsessed with a librarian at Berkeley. And then the quote is, it's another complete thought. The woman had the biggest nose I had ever seen. Because this complete thought here that begins this piece of text is a complete thought, it doesn't really work as a signal phrase because it doesn't really lead into the quote. It sort of stands independently from it. So if you catch yourself, sometimes I'll write in the comments, you've made a comma splice with a quote here. And that's what I mean. You have one complete thought and a comma and another complete thought, and it's incorrect. It kind of creates a dropped quotation because you don't really have a signal phrase leading into the quote. And also, it's a grammatical error. It's a kind of run-on where you're joining two complete thoughts or two independent clauses with just a comma. And as you may remember from our clause videos, you need, if you want to join two independent clauses, you need to join them with a coordinating conjunction, a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or you need to split them up into two sentences, or you need to join them with a semicolon. So this is also wrong. It's a mistake. And the way to correct it, there are actually several different ways you could correct it, and I just mentioned them. But in this case, what I did is I broke up the comma splice into two sentences and added a signal phrase. Dumas is obsessed with the librarian at Berkeley, period. Complete thought. She writes, signal phrase, comma, the woman had the biggest nose I had ever seen. So that's one way to avoid creating a comma splice with a quote. This next one is a really easy, picky one. Many of you are putting the period at the end of a quotation, right at the end of the quotation, instead of after the parentheses or after the parenthetical citation, which is actually where it belongs. So this is incorrect. You can see there's a period here inside the quotes after week. But that period actually, even though it is beside week in the book, you want to, when you have a parenthetical citation, which is what we call the page number in parentheses here, you want to put that period after the parentheses. So this is wrong. And to correct it, very simple, just move that period to after the parentheses that have the page number. That's a really easy one to fix. I should say there are actually two exceptions to that rule. One is if the quote is a question, like, do you miss living in Iran? If the quote ends with a question mark, you go ahead and you put that question mark at the end of the quote, inside the quotes, but you also put a period after the parenthetical citation. Same thing with exclamation points. If the quote ends with an exclamation point, you go ahead and stick that exclamation point at the end of the quote inside the quotation marks. And then you also, again, put the period after the citation. Okay, here's another really simple one. A lot of people are very tempted to stick in a P period before a page number in an in-text citation, which might be ALA style, which you might use in your social sciences class, but in MLA style, which is what we use in English classes, you don't do that. So Dumas says her father immediately filled out the form and started dreaming about studying in America. And a lot of you are putting this little P period here before the page number. To correct that, all you do is take that little P period out. So notice down here, Dumas says her father immediately filled out the form and started dreaming about studying in America. No P period needed, just 89 and a period after the parentheses. The last error I'm seeing a lot is not capitalizing the beginning of a quotation when it is the beginning of the sentence for the speaker. So this is a little tricky, but when you are quoting a speaker like Dumas from her book, and you are quoting from the beginning of her sentence, even though it's not the beginning of your sentence, you should capitalize the beginning of the quotation. So for example, if you write, after many years of being called Julie, Dumas decides to go back to her real name, period. She writes, comma, when I went to college, I immediately went back to using my real name. So when she writes this sentence in the book, this when is capitalized because it's the beginning of her sentence. So we should also capitalize it. So this is wrong. And to fix it, all you have to do is capitalize it. After many years of being called Julie, Dumas decides to go back to her real name. She writes, and then I capitalized the W. When I went to college, I immediately went back to using my real name. I'd like you to notice or point out to you that often when we are quoting, we are not starting at the beginning of a speaker or a writer's sentence. For example, in this example we looked at just a couple seconds ago, Dumas, in this example, I use part of a sentence and I start the quote in the middle of Dumas' sentence. So in that case, I don't capitalize the I. So I wrote, Dumas says her father, quote, immediately filled out the form and started dreaming about studying in America. Since I'm starting in the middle of that sentence, starting the quote in the middle of the sentence, I don't need to capitalize that I. All right. I know we've been talking a lot about quotation integration recently, and that's because it's really important and it really makes your essay stronger when you get it right. So keep these things in mind. And when you think you understand everything I've talked about in this video, go ahead and take this week's quiz. It should be posted by tomorrow, Wednesday at 5 o'clock.